The National Judicial Appointments Commission is dead. Long live the decades-old collegium to pick the country's top judges. In a huge embarrassment to the government, the Supreme Court today struck down the constitutional amendment for the setting up of NJAC, calling it unconstitutional. A five-judge bench headed by Justice J.S. Kehar ordered the revival of the collegium system or judges selecting judges. The Supreme Court, however, said it was ready to accept suggestions to improve the appointment process and has posted the next hearing for the 3rd of November.
A shell-shocked government expressed surprise over what the Supreme Court's verdict was and even questioned the transparency of the existing collegium system. Law Minister Sadanand Gowda said that the verdict threatens the sovereignty of Indian Parliament, while Attorney General Mukul Rohatgi said that Supreme Court has chosen to ignore the will of the centre and the state governments, 20 of whom had voted in favour of the NJC. Even the main opposition party, the Congress, was not quite convinced, as it warned that the ruling will put the veil back on the appointment of judges. Is the Supreme Court verdict a reflection of the judiciary's lack of confidence in the legislature? Is it all over the government's efforts to reform the judicial appointments? And more importantly, what are the options before the government right now? Will we actually see the Union Parliament strike back at the judiciary? That is our top story right here in Business Tonight.
It's the final showdown between the executive and the judiciary, a body blow to the government's plans to change the appointment system of judges. Because in a landmark judgment, the five-judge bench of the Supreme Court today struck down the National Judicial Appointments Commission, calling the 99th Amendment to the Constitution of India unconstitutional and also void. In one single stroke, the court has scrapped all plans of the executive to have a hand in selection of judges, both to the high courts across the country and also the Supreme Court. The five-judge bench, consisting of J.S. Kehar, J.J. Lameshwar, Madan B. Lokur, Kurian Joseph and A.K. Goyal, said that the existing collegium system, which is in effect for over 20 years now, will continue. But the court has indeed asked for suggestions to make the judicial appointment systems better. The struck-down law proposed to appoint judges by a body comprising of the Chief Justice of India, two other senior judges of the Supreme Court, the Union Law Minister and two eminent persons nominated for a period of 3 years without the provision of renomination. The law strictly provided that one of the two eminent persons would be either from the scheduled caste or the scheduled tribe or other backward castes, or from the minority community, or even a woman. It was the appointment of these two eminent persons that was at the center of all controversy, because these would have been largely political appointments done by a committee consisting of the Chief Justice of India, the Prime Minister and also the Leader of Opposition in the Lok Sabha. The idea really was to make the appointment of judges inclusive and also broaden the ambit. The NJC, after all, had the complete backing of both houses of parliament, and this constitutional amendment bill was even ratified by 20 Indian states. So certainly that's not the last we've heard of this matter. The government is unlikely to take this line down, and given the unanimous political backing of the NJC, a call to review or even a strike back from parliament is not being ruled out.
We brought the will of the people. 100% of the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha members, they have supported the bill. 100%.
The verdict is flawed. The collegium system has now been directed to be revived by the court. The collegium system is not a system which is found in the Constitution. According to me, that system is not appropriate.
By stating that the collegiums need to be improved, the Supreme Court has certainly accepted that the current rules are flawed, which is why questions still persist. Will Parliament now strike back? Will the judiciary and executive be on collision course once again? How flawed is the present collegium system, and what can be done to improve it? And shouldn't the government, after all, have a role in the appointment of judges? Many questions that we at ET Now will get you answers to. Supriya, Shrinate, ET Now, New Delhi.
What are the implications of the verdict? Is this the end of the debate, or will the executive take a step back only to fire a fresh salvo? To discuss this and more, we have two of the biggest legal veterans in this country, Harish Salve and Jethmalani. It doesn't get bigger than this. Mr. Salve, I'm going to start with you. What do you think that the government should do now that the NJAC has been termed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court?
As I said, the government has to decide. One option is to accept this and go along with it. The other option is, if they feel that this is not correct and they need an alternative institution, go back to the drawing board and see how they can come up with a better alternative. There are very wise people in the government. They will be advised, and I'm sure they'll take a studied. I saw Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad's comments at 4 p.m. They were very mature, very balanced. He made some very strong points. I'm sure people will sit down around a table and decide what to do.
You're perhaps giving the devil a lot of due there, but do you believe the government will take this lying down, or do you expect them to go for a review, a larger bench, a 7-judge or a 9-judge bench? Do you expect that to follow?
Why do you people always want to start a war? No, this lying down is not the spirit in which anybody should view it. These are institutional differences. They need to be ironed out. I have no idea of whether the government is going to accept this, or whether the government will go back to the drawing board and see if there is some other model which they could fashion, which would pass constitutional muster.
Mr. Jethmalani, I know you're a strong opponent of the NJAC, and you do believe that people in India should thank the 5 wise men who struck it down today. But what do you think will the next course of action will be? Will the government take this lying down? Is it going to go for a review? Is Parliament going to strike back? Will it perhaps pass a resolution against this order? What do you think is likely to follow?
Well, this requires an assessment of the government's character. I have not made a final assessment, though I think that very likely they will try to interfere with this judgment. They will not learn a lesson from it at all, which they should. And already today there is all India rejoicing about the kind of judgment that the Supreme Court has delivered. And if the government doesn't believe in democracy, and the government still wishes to do something to sustain a lost cause, it is their misfortune. I have always said that the persons who are responsible are those who are advising the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister has a great defense. His great defense is that he is a constitutional ignoramus. He knows nothing about the Constitution. Then his second defense is that he doesn't think that the Constitution is a matter of great importance to the kind of work that he is doing. I mean, he is all the time spending his time outside India. What he achieves, he alone knows. No, nothing is happening for the country or in the interest of the country. He doesn't even report what he attains there and what he does. So, if that is his view, well, he is entitled to it, but I think he should have the intelligence to realize that his reputation is going very, very fast. It is going downwards. And this judgment is not going to add to his reputation, but will destroy it if he doesn't heed it properly. I think he should turn around and now cooperate with the judgment and give up the ambitions of controlling the judiciary as he is controlling some members of his cabinet.
Right. Mr. Salve, I'm going to throw it back to you. Can the Parliament strike back? Can Parliament modify or pass a resolution against this order? What's your sense? Do you expect it to do so? Because there was almost political unanimity on this particular issue.
The Parliament doesn't pass resolutions on judgments. There are certain concerns the judges have expressed about the working, and I can tell you 2 which I can flag immediately. One is, the amendment to the Constitution only says there will be an NJAC, and then the rest is all left to Parliament to enact. You have a law today, you're leaving it to Parliament to change this law tomorrow. So one option would be to recast the constitutional amendment and put all these provisions in the Constitution so that they are cast in stone. That is one. The other is, there are certain areas of concern which the court has expressed. I think maybe a little more homework about how other models work in other countries. The government can look at it, do a little homework and come back with a revised model.
Sure. So Mr. Jethmalani, for now the collegium system will continue, but Supreme Court has asked for fine-tuning. What could that be? And is this an admission that the collegium system in itself is flawed, which is what the political class wants us to believe?
Well, everything can be improved in life. Everything human can be improved. And I believe that even our system of appointment of judges may need some improvement here and there, but this bill was not intended to make those improvements, and that is why it has been declared unconstitutional. The Supreme Court itself is now considering what improvements to make, and they will hear the bar, they will hear everybody concerned, and let us see what are the problems which the judiciary itself discloses to us about the functioning of the judiciary. Once we know about it, we will help to resolve that problem, but we will not allow the primacy of the judiciary in matter of judicial appointments to be diluted or to be interfered with.
All right, everything in life that's human can improve. I wonder if you agree with your arch rival Jethmalani there, Mr. Salve, but the fact that the Supreme Court has admitted on its own that the system is flawed, it has asked for suggestions to improve it, means there is fine-tuning required. Now, what could that fine-tuning really be, according to you?
Well, I must say our court is never ever found wanting in addressing its own shortcomings. It has it has acknowledged that there are problems in the working of the system. One of the biggest problems has been the alleged lack of transparency. And possibly they want to look at certain minor institutional changes. I continue to hold the view that the court should not get into this exercise of appointing judges. It is wrong at various levels. We can have a full-dress debate someday on why appointing judges is not a good idea, ideologically. Not because our judges are not good enough or any judges are not good enough. Ideologically, there are problems.
Fair point indeed, and I agree with the ideological problems. You cannot really appoint your successors, and there's something wrong with that. But Mr. Jethmalani, the present system, and the reason why its review was required is because it's a very closed system. It allows for very little movement of people from outside the system to really enter in. How will the collegium ensure that there is more representation from women, the minorities, the SC/STs? How is this collegium really going to, really going to refer to that? And the larger question then is that it had the backing of 100% of the parliament, it had the backing of 20 state legislatures, and you still don't give in. Should the Supreme Court not have accommodated the will of the people, as it were?
I am sorry, Parliament is not under the Constitution of India, the sovereign interpreter of the sovereign of people of India. It is ultimately the Constitution which will decide. The Constitution is not amendable at the will of every Prime Minister who comes or every Finance Minister who comes in power.
Right. But, Mr. Salve, one will argue that this is the will of the people, both houses, 100%, and state legislatures, 20 of them. Shouldn't the Supreme Court have taken cognizance of the fact that this is the will of the people and given in?
Oh, no. Let's be very clear. The Supreme Court doesn't count numbers in Parliament. The purpose of judicial review, the thinkers, the political thinkers on whose knowledge and on whose wisdom we found democratic constitutions such as ours, acknowledge this is to prevent the power of the majority steamrolling. Look at Mrs. Gandhi's times. She had 2/3 majority. There was steamrolling legislation. Judges don't count numbers in Parliament. They look at the constitution and see whether it is good enough. I mean, the judges would have, believe me, come to exactly this conclusion if they were just passed, one vote past the minimum required. I am proud of the Supreme Court that at least if they came to this conclusion, they have not balked at striking down the law merely because there was political unanimity.
Mr. Jethmalani, don't you think we've gone back to a position where Parliament and judiciary are at loggerheads? Because surely the fallout of this judgment is going to be a more strained relationship between the legislature and the executive.
They are not at loggerheads, but if somebody wants to get into loggerheads, it is their, it will be their fault and their ruin.
All right, Mr. Jethmalani doesn't care if they're at loggerheads or not, but Mr. Salve, what about you? Are they back on collision course? The executive proposes, the judiciary has struck down, the government may still prepare to come back on this, back on collision course, back to being at loggerheads there?
Well, if left to you people, you would love to see that because you get more breaking news, but no, I don't. I hope that will not happen. 2015, the world is a more mature place.
We do believe 2015 the world is a more mature place, the signs of which are really not visible in Indian democracy or in Indian judiciary so far. Thanks very much, gentlemen. Two of the finest legal luminaries of our times, Harish Salve and Jethmalani, in conversation right here on ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.